Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new MOVA session. Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Jone, part of the UNEP team for the Latin America and the Caribbean region. I'm very glad to have you with us today. We will be talking about electric mobility in the Caribbean with Caris Boodoo. Caris is currently holds the position of assistant professor in the utilities engineering unit at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and program coordinator for the electric and electronics engineering diploma program at the John Donaldson campus since 2008. He developed and currently administers the first dedicated renewable energy engineering technician program in CARICOM. And in March 2018, he was appointed co-chair for the Specification Committee for Electric and Plug-in Hybrid Vehicle Standards by the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. He was project manager for the electric bus project in Trinidad and Tobago. This was the first electric bus in CARICOM and the first electric vehicle in the country. In 2017, he was awarded a grant for the training in the installation of electric vehicle charging stations. He is currently the chairman for the electric vehicle work group in CARICOM. He has the responsibility for developing and executing EV-related projects and initiatives within CARICOM, and is part of the team finalizing the regional electric vehicle strategy for the region. So welcome, Caris. Thank you so much for being us today. We are really keen and glad that you are going to show us what is going on in the Caribbean regarding electric mobility, knowing that everything is different from Latin America, and we have to see that. We have to know what is going on. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Joni, and thank you for the opportunity to present on an excellent series by the MOVE team that focuses on electromobility. So I'm excited to be here and delighted as well. Could you just verify that you are hearing me clearly so I could proceed?
Perfectly.
Thank you. To begin our discussion on e-mobility, or probably on the broader context of transportation in the region, it is important to have at least a socio-economic background of the CARICOM region, which is where I would be focusing on. Now, I am aware that we would have a large number of attendees from the Latin America region. So a slide giving information on CARICOM and what CARICOM is about, it would be important. So CARICOM comprises of 15 member nations. As you can see, the members of CARICOM stretch all the way from the south to the north of the Caribbean Sea, and we are bounded by Belize on the east. So we do have continental members in Guyana and Suriname, and CARICOM consists of most of the smaller islands in the region, including the larger island of Jamaica and Haiti, and we also include the island chain that makes up the Bahamas. Now, when you are looking at the energy landscape in CARICOM, or in this case, the electric vehicle sphere in CARICOM, there are two organizations that are what we like to say front and center. The first one to note is CARICOM Energy. So CARICOM Energy is based in Turkey and Guyana. Dr. Devon Gardner heads that organization. And the second organization to note is the CCRE, or the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, that is headquartered in Barbados, and Dr. Gary Jackson heads that organization. So when you have to talk about energy, or in this case, electric vehicles, these are two prominent organizations that are very active in the region. So continuing the conversation on the socio-economic background on CARICOM countries. So this slide represents some updated information on member states in CARICOM, their population and other indicators. Montserrat is left out from this slide. Montserrat is a member of CARICOM, but Montserrat is an overseas territory of the UK. So their data is not collected here. So if you like, we could, so if we'll just focus on the population column, you would note that the most populous island in the region that is a member of CARICOM is Haiti, with close to 11 million persons. And the least populated country would be St. Kitts and Nevis, with around 52,000 persons. So there's a wide range when it comes to the population of the member states in the region. Having said so, of course, compared to other countries, our populations are much smaller. So if we continue our discussion along with the annual GDP per country, the largest economy in CARICOM is actually my own country, Trinidad and Tobago. We are a oil and gas based economy, so this is where the majority of our GDP would come from. Taking a look at the other CARICOM nations, second to Trinidad and Tobago, you would notice that Jamaica would have the largest economy. So apart from tourism, they do have a mature manufacturing sector. So the lower end, looking at the lower end in terms of GDP, I would just like to bring your attention to Dominica. So it has one of the lowest GDP in the region, and this is because primarily due to tropical cyclone or Hurricane Maria, which in 2017 would have devastated Dominica. In fact, the devastation of Dominica, the cost of that disaster, it was 226% of the gross domestic product of Dominica. So they are still in the recovery stage. You could see that from the economic growth that they have. So if we move on to GDP per capita, leading the list is the Bahamas. The Bahamas, again, has a very significant tourism sector as well as a financial banking sector. So they do have the largest GDP per capita in the region. If you go down the list, you would, the lowest GDP per capita in the region. So that is currently Haiti. And again, that is well known. So if you were to focus on the Human Development Index for the region, most countries hover around 0.7. The higher Human Development Index for the region goes to the Bahamas and Barbados, and the lowest for the region coincides with Haiti. So this perspective is important when you want to talk transport, or if you want to talk more specifically, in this case, around electric vehicles. So just jumping into the topic of transportation, this slide or this plot gives you the percentage of fuel that is used for transportation for different countries in CARICOM. So if you just immediately focus on Trinidad and Tobago, as I mentioned, we are a large oil and gas exporter, so the percentage of fuel for transportation for us is very low. And I would like to highlight that all countries in CARICOM currently import their transportation fuel. So if you notice, most countries, they use more than 40% of their fuel for the purpose of transportation, and this is imported fuel. The other share of the fuel the majority of that share, of course, would go towards power generation. So the goal of these countries and the goal for the region is to reduce this importation bill of not only transportation fuel, but also fuel for the purpose of power generation. So this slide presents a comparison between electricity and gasoline costs for selected islands in the region. You would note not all the islands are members of CARICOM, however. So I would just like to bring your attention to the cost of electricity in the region. So for Barbados, which would be a focus point for us in our presentation, it's around 26 US cents per kilowatt hour. To put this in context, the global average is around 14 US cents per kilowatt hour. So in the region, we do pay a high price for electricity, but we also pay a very high price for gasoline. So the gasoline prices in Barbados is around 6.75 US dollars per gallon. It is also high in Bermuda. Barbados has one of the highest costs for gasoline in CARICOM in the region. And there have been a few times where Barbados has been in the top 10 globally when it comes to the costs for gasoline. So there most definitely is opportunity here when you compare the cost for fuel in terms of electricity, albeit the cost for electricity in the region is high when you compare it to the cost of gasoline. So I've spoken about opportunities for us in the region when it comes to the deployment of electric vehicles and by means of decreasing our importation of liquid transportation fuel and using a more cheaper alternative, which is electricity. But electric vehicle deployment in the region still remains at a low percentage. Barbados, which is leading the region in terms of electric vehicle deployment, is currently around 500 vehicles, and that would be less than 1% of the total number of vehicles in Barbados. So there is this need for some sort of policy framework or policy guidance, both nationally and regionally, to increase the deployment of electric vehicles in the region and to address the challenges that we currently have with the deployment of EVs in the region. There has been a history of transportation policies in CARICOM. In fact, the energy policies or the previous energy policies of CARICOM have included transportation in their rollout or in the documentation. And the first policy I would like to bring to your attention is the CARICOM Energy Policy of 2013, which does has a section for transportation. And in that policy, they recognize the importance of fuel switching in the region, switching fuels to fuels that are more efficient and pollute less. Again, the policy does speak to promotion of fuel-efficient vehicles and the use of cleaner fuels. The policy identifies EVs and hybrid vehicles as a long-term solution to our transportation needs. The policy also identifies the need for a holistic look at transportation, meaning including planning and traffic management. And the policy identifies the benefits of an efficient mass transit system for the region and for the islands. So that was the CARICOM Energy Policy 2013. The CSERM's policy, which is the CARICOM Sustainable Energy Roadmap and Strategy, which was publicly made available in 2015, addresses the transportation sector as well. So they do mention that the transportation sector is overlooked when it comes to data collection. They reiterate the need to promote EVs and hybrid vehicles in the region. And they identified yet again EVs being a solution, but if they are to be a solution, they need to be incorporated with renewable energy, and you must take into consideration developments as it relates to grid modernization or smart grids. So I began my talk on policy, which started in the CARICOM Energy Policy of 2013 and looked at the CSERMs in 2015. But in my view, what really cemented policy movements in CARICOM towards transportation were the NDCs. So what was different from the previous policies compared to the NDCs is that member states in CARICOM now made international commitments in terms of reducing their emissions, not only in the energy sector, but in the transportation sector. Now, in the 2015 NDC submissions by the member states, not all of them would have explicitly stated commitments in the transportation sector. And those that did give commitments in the transportation sector, they did not fully develop those commitments, or the commitments were not specific enough. And if you look at this this table, you would see that if you look at energy, or the energy column as it relates to NDC commitments in 2015, it is very specific, and they quantify they quantify their targets. And that is not always the case when you look at the transportation commitments, NDC commitments for the CARICOM countries, and we continue along with the other CARICOM nations here, and you would notice some countries, as I mentioned, did not explicitly give NDC commitments related to transport. The most aggressive commitment made in transportation in terms of greenhouse gas emissions is for Trinidad and Tobago, where in our 2015 NDC commitment, we committed to 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 in the public transportation sector. We have focused mainly on CNG as our solution for this, and that has had some success. So again, so my conversation has been on the need for has been on the history of transportation policies in the region, and there most definitely is a need for regional policy. So transportation has been part of the energy policy, which you saw as the CARICOM Energy Policy, the CSIRMs, and has been part of the NDCs, but has not been prominent and has not been a focus. We don't have a focus or dedicated policy for the region on transportation. And this is important because, as I mentioned, transportation, both nationally as well, is underdeveloped in terms of policy. And I would talk about certain challenges that we face nationally as it relates to transportation. Transportation planning is very complex. And when dealing with something that is complex, you could look at it localized in a localized fashion, meaning nationally, but you should also look at it regionally, or have an overarching view. In our NDCs, all member states of CARICOM, I guess all countries in the world, just excluding a few, have made commitments to the reduce emissions in the power generation sector and transportation sector in the NDCs. So a transportation policy would strengthen these commitments. And the region must be prepared for technology advancement in the transportation sector in terms of preparing the policies and preparing the infrastructure for these changes in or to adapt to these transportation developments. Right, so continuing along, in 2017, CARICOM Energy established the Electric Vehicles Work Group. The Electric Vehicles Work Group consists of stakeholders in the region, in CARICOM, that came from financial institutions, regional EV dealerships, utility companies, ministries, and developmental partners active in the region. The aim of the Electric Vehicle Work Group was threefold. The first one was really to provide a forum for national governments and institutions and other players to share their experiences and lessons and good practices when it relates to EVs specific to the region. The second aim was to allow for information and analytics that emerge for the group to be readily shared among the Caribbean region and the stakeholders. And very important to develop or to lay the groundwork for the regional roadmap on e-mobility. And thirdly, to guide national and energy policies as it relates to transportation in the region. So the Electric Vehicle Work Group would have had regular meetings with the membership, but one of our biggest events we did have was in June of 2018 in Barbados, where we hosted in partnership, of course, with CARICOM Energy and the GIZ, electric mobility workshop, electric mobility lab, and technology expo. So we invited stakeholders from all over, from across the CARICOM region, which would have included government ministries, private companies, universities, NGOs, utilities, and financial institutions. So there was a wide participation from the sectors relevant in the region. For those of you who know about the triple helix of innovation, which highlights the importance of connecting industry with government and universities, well, it is prominent to see that that triple helix for innovation was utilized in selecting the delegates for the mobility event. For the two-day Elmo Lab workshop, participants were asked to come together in a creative or innovative process called design thinking to focus on the creation of the regional roadmap for electric mobility in CARICOM. And we focused, or the groups focused on innovative financing for EVs, training and capacity building in the region. They focused on resilience as it relates to transportation in the region, and I will talk a little more on resilience later on, and also grid modernization. And the discussions also focused on incentives for EVs in the CARICOM context. So using the output from the Elmo Lab and the many stakeholder meetings that the electric vehicles work group would have held, we proceeded to develop the framework for the regional electric vehicle and strategy. Again, just to highlight, this framework was accomplished with the work of three organizations in the region: the Electric Vehicle Work Group, CARICOM Energy, and CCRE. So the framework document would have been made publicly available last year, and you could find a copy of the framework, the REVS framework document on the CCRE's website. So if your thoughts are on when the final comprehensive REVS document will be made publicly available, that we expect that to be publicly available in the first half of this year. So just to give you a bit of an insight on the roadmap and what it looks like, the aims of the REVS, and just to pick out some keynote words, is to deliver an intelligent, modern, affordable, clean, efficient, safe transportation or mobility solution for CARICOM. And to design the REVS, we utilize three strategic imperatives, which are innovation, intelligence, and electrification. And I just want to spend some time on this slide explaining how we came about with these strategic imperatives. So we looked at the disruption that was taking place in the energy sector. And a lot of authors like to use the 3Ds to classify this disruption, and we like to use it as well. The 3Ds being digitization, decentralization, and decarbonization. So the disruption taking place in the transportation sector because of the mass adoption or the mass investment in EVs, this disruption was taking place in the transportation sector as well. So we use these strategic imperatives, innovation, intelligence, and electrification, to really harness the disruption we expect to take place and prepare the region through this REVS policy for the mass adoption of EVs. And each one of these strategic imperatives would be implemented under these three broad areas: finance and market development, capacity development, and technology and infrastructure. So I just want to take the opportunity to highlight some of the work that went on in one of the initiatives I just showed you, which focuses on capacity development and awareness. And I would highlight some of the events that took place last year in 2020. So all these events were done in partnership, were done as part of a partnership between CARICOM Energy and CCRE. So the first event related to e-mobility was, or the first one I would like to highlight, was in June 2016, last year, where we looked at, this was an event that focused or the theme was the innovation opportunities and the Caribbean reality considerations for the REBs. So this event was, of course, all these events are open for the public and anyone could attend, but this event was merely geared towards policymakers, technocrats, and other persons that are involved in the e-mobility sector. It was a high-level introduction or explanation of the REVs, and we would have taken feedback from this event in terms of comments and the participation of the participants. The other event that I would like to bring to your attention is the Electric Vehicle Maintenance Train of Trainers program. Now, this is actually a very successful event that was hosted by the CCRI, and I could provide some information on it. So they specifically targeted instructors representing training institutions within CARICOM. And they targeted auto mechanic trainers, first responders, regulators, electrical inspectors, and customer personnel. This training was delivered by a Canadian university. It was delivered online, and they got over 300 interested persons. Unfortunately, they catered for around 160 participants, and they actually did commit to rerunning this training. So it was very successful, and it really did focus and target the persons or the trainers or the stakeholders directly involved in e-mobility in the region. And the other event I would like to talk about is a virtual EV roadshow. And this one catered for a different audience. It really catered to the average person or the average person on the street or the average person in CARICOM, whereby we would explain to them what an electric vehicle is. We had very instructive videos on the operation of EVs, where we had active auto EV dealers or dealerships active in the region, doing live demos on EVs, showing them the different parts, how do you maintain an electric vehicle, etc. So this event really targeted the average person and gave a hands-on experience, as best as we could given the restrictions of COVID, to persons on EVs. And all these events are part of a larger focus in CARICOM and CARICOM Energy in the region with regards to their Energy Knowledge Hub. And their Energy Knowledge Hub, the goal of it is really to encompass a community of practice for sustainable energy practitioners. And this includes, of course, e-mobility. So if you would recall, one of the strategic imperatives in the REVs is innovation. And we did mention what one of the areas or initiatives we will look at implementation is in innovation. So in the next few slides, I want to discuss or bring to the discussion certain innovative business models that involve the utility. And the first one that I would like to discuss is what is called the mobility utility. In CARICOM, this is also called the integrated utility service model. So there are similarities, perhaps some differences, and there's some good work going on with CARICOM Energy and the CCRI in implementing or looking at member states to try to get them to implement this integrated utility approach. So what this model is one where the utility is central to your purchase of an EV, meaning that your utility powers provides you with your electricity, yes, but they also provide you with your electric vehicle. They provide you with the financing for your electric vehicle. You purchase your electric vehicle from them. You get a bundled package in terms of your electricity rate from the utility, and the utility would handle the maintenance of the vehicle as well. So this model really looks at a complete integration of energy and transportation. And it looks at an integration in terms of the perspective of the customer, meaning that you have one entity or one institution or one business you deal with to satisfy all your energy and transportation needs. Now, granted, this model is more suited for investor-owned or majority investor-owned utilities in the region. But we see this model, and we do have a few majority investor-owned utilities in the region. And we do see this model as being an effective way of utilizing our resources in the region, one where the utility has control over your transportation and your energy needs. The other model I would like to bring to your attention is what is called the EV white label. So roughly around 60% of utilities in the region are primarily publicly owned. And this could pose a challenge. Publicly owned utilities are not risk adverse as primarily investor-owned utilities. So what this model or this innovative model proposes is handing over much of the characteristics and responsibilities of the last model to a investor-based business organization that would provide these services. So the utility and this third-party organization would engage in discussions regarding rates, regarding time of use, and those discussions would provide a framework in which this third-party entity would then provide services to customers, meaning that you would now purchase your EV from this third-party entity, and this third-party entity would provide you with a bundled electricity deal as well. And we would also assume this third-party entity would also install your solar and take care of your renewable energy needs. There are a lot of advantages between these two models, and we could have a further discussion on this in the question and answer section, as I believe it may take up a little more time or too much time directly in the presentation. I would like to spend some time talking on Barbados and use Barbados as a case study. And it's important to note that the accomplishments of Barbados as it relates to EV deployment was done in the absence of any significant regional policy that encourages the adoption of EVs. And it was also done in the absence of any significant national policy that encourages the adoption for EVs. So it's important to take a look at Barbados and how they overcome their challenges and the ingredients of success for them. So again, just like I started off with an overall context for CARICOM, looking at the economic and social aspects, it is important as well to look at some general facts for Barbados. And I would bring your attention to show that Barbados is really small. It's around 430 kilometers square. The next metric I would like to bring to your attention is that around more than one for every employed person, there's a vehicle. Well, it's really more than that. It's 1.2 vehicles per employed person. And this is a wider problem in the region where we do not have efficient and safe public transportation sector. And because of that, persons are forced to make use of private transportation or own their own private transportation. So Barbados spends a lot of money in ground transportation fuel, around 165,000 US per day. They have around 500 EVs currently in the island. Their charging network is around 119. And what makes them special? Well, for every 574 persons in Barbados, one of them would own an EV. So they do have a high per capita ownership of EVs in the region, and that is a high average also globally. So I would now like to dive into a couple of slides that was delivered by the utility in Barbados, by the systems engineer Antonio Seeley, where the utility seek to address problems or to mitigate some of their problems associated with a large deployment of EVs. And just for context, the installed capacity in Barbados is around 262 megawatts. Included in that 262 megawatts, 10 megawatts is of solar. So in this slide, the utility focused at the distribution level, or the effects of EV charging at the distribution level. And you could see one of their distribution transformers, a 25 kVA transformer, it would normally account for around 50 homes. But if you charge 3 EVs using a normal home charger, which might be around 7 or 6 kilowatts, then you quickly reach the capacity of the distribution transformer. So there are issues associated with the distribution system when it comes to the asset health and the reliability of these transformers. So the utility presented some solutions as it relates to mitigate the effect of EV charging on the grid. So they immediately saw the importance of an education program for customers and stakeholders. They have begun the process of rolling out advanced metering infrastructure. It is important, or they saw the value of surveys and data collection. And this is important for us, and especially islands in CARICOM. When EVs are sold, and the majority of EVs are sold in Barbados by a single business, the utility does not immediately know who purchases an EV. And if they don't know who immediately purchases an EV, they don't know where the potential locations this EV will be charging, and they can't plan for it. So they began the process of looking at capturing information as it relates to persons who own EVs and where do they charge. So that is something that different member states in the region would have to look at incorporating in their policies to capture persons that purchase EVs. So they are looking at smart charging, demand response. They are also looking at some sort of curtailment if the penetration of EVs becomes significant. They are incorporating EVs in their forecasting and planning stages. They are looking at time of use rates, and they have begun looking into some advanced functions that you could access using EVs. Take, for example, vehicle to grid. So Barbados as well has the largest electric bus fleet in the Caribbean. It currently stands at 33 plus 2. Their first batch of electric buses were 33, and then they got 2 more later this year. And there was an excellent earlier presentation by the Move group that focused on public transportation in Barbados, and you most definitely should have a look at it. It's very comprehensive. I just wanted to highlight that Barbados does not only focus on purchasing electric buses for public transportation, they are also focusing on retrofitting or repowering diesel buses to electric, and this is the first diesel bus that has been repowered to electric, and this was accomplished locally in Barbados. So they are looking at development of the local economy as it relates to EVs as well. So what are the ingredients for success in Barbados? You know, I mentioned a high liquid transportation fuel, one of the highest in the region. Also, the e-mobility revolution started with a very innovative private company that saw the natural synergy between EVs and renewable energy in Barbados. If you recall, Barbados has a very high cost for gasoline and also has a very high cost for electricity. Another ingredient of success was a progressive power utility that embraced electric vehicles and tried to incorporate them in their business planning. There was an early investment in charging infrastructure, meaning that charging stations were rolled out at popular consumer locations, which would be malls and coffee shops. And there was an early focus on fleet adoption. Electric vehicles are still relative to ICE vehicles. The upfront cost is greater. So that excludes a certain portion of the population from purchasing EVs. So by you focusing initially on fleet owners, you could help the adoption of EVs. Oddly enough, you would expect the electrification of public transportation to come first, but because this was a private sector-led revolution when it comes to EVs. The electrification of public transportation in Barbados came later on. The buses only arrived last year. So this is an example of a EV or e-mobility adoption that was private sector led. And all these accomplishments were done in the context that EVs have not been zero rated from taxes and duties in Barbados. EVs are currently zero rated in certain countries in CARICOM. Other countries have reduced ratings on them, but Barbados accomplished this deployment of EVs in the absence of zero rating of taxes and duties. So the REVs we do look at emerging technologies, and in fact, emerging technologies in the e-mobility sphere is important for us, and is something that is important to capture at the policy level early on. And the REVs focuses on surface transport, and our definition of surface transport is both ground transport and indigenous maritime transport. If you recall, when I showed you the map of CARICOM, quite a number of CARICOM countries are multi-island states, meaning that they are nations with multiple islands, and there is a significant amount of indigenous marine transportation that takes place among these islands. And the electric ferries are an interest for us in the region. And I just highlighted some of the characteristics of Ellen, which is currently in operation in the Danish islands. And at this time, a commercially available electric ferry can service some of the multi-island states, but not all. But it is my opinion that this technology requires some more time to be more applicable for the region. Not only there's the high costs, but an issue for us is the large amount of power required to charge these ferries. And this large amount of power for the very small electricity grids that we have in the region may prove a challenge. So here in mind, especially as it relates to indigenous maritime transport, they might have an application here in the region for the use of hydrogen. As it relates to marine transport, at least with hydrogen, you would not have this high demand on the grid for the purpose of charging these electric ferries, which are large, with a large battery capacity. An important project that is ongoing in the UK for us is the vehicle to grid or the bus to grid project, which is ongoing in London. This is important for us because this project has the potential to increase the resilience in the transportation sector in CARICOM. So we are faced by hurricanes annually. The hurricane season lasts 6 months. And the hurricanes that, well, it is of note that most of the hurricanes in the recent past have been as strong as Category 5, and they have caused significant damage to not only the power infrastructure, but also the transportation infrastructure. And the goal by moving towards EVs is that we do have a number of utility scale or distributed utility scale EV installations in CARICOM. And if in a post-disaster, these solar installations, if they are still operational, then we could have the potential of providing fuel for EVs immediately after disaster. In the case of the vehicle to grid or bus to grid, we have the opportunity, if this technology is brought to the Caribbean, to utilize the vast storage or electricity storage in buses, electric buses, to be used post-disaster as it relates to hurricanes or other disasters. So this project is relevant to us. It is also relevant to us because at this time, to my knowledge, all the buses in CARICOM are BYD buses. This project in the UK is with a partnership with BYD and Alexander Dennis. So we do have some regional hurdles as it relates to the deployment of electric vehicles. And we do have some opportunities in the region. And I wanted to discuss this in a broader context of transportation rather than focus on e-mobility alone. So what are the hurdles and what I would say are bridges for us in the region as it relates to transportation and also e-mobility? So the first item I would like to highlight, so this is my list of hurdles. It seems long, but it's not insurmountable. In the region, we don't have a presence of an automotive manufacturer, and this has consequences in terms of that support in the region. We always have to get support from the outside. I am now cognizant of the time, so I'll try to hurry up. We have a small market as well. And this small market means that costs for services and products for us is much higher. I could talk to you about a personal case where I'm involved in a pilot project for electric bus. And normally pilot projects, they involve a very low or small volume. And international electric bus manufacturers are not necessarily interested in providing low volume buses for pilot projects in the region. And this is something that affects us. Public transportation needs to be improved. An upgrade of our...
Hi, Curtis.
Yeah, I'm quickly passing through, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a moment so we can have some questions for you.
Yes, thank you. So let me focus on the bridges. We do have a technical labor force that could handle the e-mobility revolution in the region. We do have an abundant renewable energy resource, and we do have a successful regional organization that coordinates in CARICOM. The REVS does not directly address sustainable transportation, but it can easily fit in a regional sustainable transportation policy. Thank you for listening. I look forward for your questions. Sorry for taking so long.
Thank you so much, Curtis, for the presentation. Don't worry about the time. That's really, really interesting. So, yes, very welcome for the presentation. Thank you so much. I would like just to highlight some ideas of the differences and similarities of the Caribbean region with the Latin American region. One of the things that you say is the lack of information, lack of data. That is something that is really, really common in all the countries. We do have the same challenge in the Latin American countries. I think that's something that we all together can overcome, trying to not only to expose the good and successful stories on how the things were done, but also the not so good stories or failures that we can all learn together. So I think that from our side in UNEP that we are trying to get all that knowledge out. I think you with the electric regional group is the same idea, how to lift up and live from all the countries. So I think that's the same challenge. Obviously, there is a really, really big difference between the countries. I think that the two models that you saw can be really useful for all the Latin American countries, because as the same as in the Caribbean islands, we do have some countries that have all public companies, and then some of them have private ones. So those two models, I think, that can be really they could be really helpful for the Latin American countries to know and to pursue the electrification. So thank you so much for that. I will just have a few more comments that in the terms of grid integration, how the electrification is seen way more comprehensively and how the impact can go on the grid for the first actions that are taken. We can see that is something that's being seen secondly in some countries in Latin America. So this grid integration, I'm very much worried about big data management, on how all that information is managed properly and effectively to actually, leverage all the benefits that can come from the electrification to the grid energy and vice versa. So that's something that is a great challenge, I think, for everyone. the integration with key industries on the islands, as you say, the tourism, and how can tourism and electrification go together and pursue forward. I think there's a really great vision on how the electrification is not only mobility, but is actually everything that you have in your industry. Everyone that lives in your country is part of the electrification process.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Barbados case, I mean, we are always looking into Barbados, how they are doing things, because as you say, with no strategic and no planning from the bottom to down, from up to down, bottom, how everything was achieved.
Yeah.
All the buses that they have is amazing. So we are really looking into Barbados once and again to see how they are achieving their things. So thank you so much for the presentation. We do have some questions.
Sure.
The first one is one barrier to EVs in the Caribbean can be the loss of imported fuel tax revenues and imported fuel tax revenues. If EVs have subsidized, any ideas or suggestion how this can be addressed?
So just to be clear on the question, Joni, they're asking about, could you just reread the first part?
Yeah, it says one of the barriers to EVs in the Caribbean can be the loss of imported fuel tax revenues.
Yes.
So how can this be managed? Or any suggestion that how can this be solved?
Yeah, so that is a challenge, and I could give you an example that in my own country. So we had zero tax rating on EVs in Trinidad, and in our recent budget, the government made a decision to remove that, and it is now taxed. So it is a huge challenge, especially with COVID, because taxation from fuel and the purchase of vehicles is a lucrative source of income for island states. So I think the countries have to look at the long-term future of the region and their own nations. You have to look at displacing this imported ground transportation fuel. And the more renewable energy you incorporate in the grid and you use electric vehicles, then you get to displace or you import less imported liquid fuels. And that would come at a cost. I mean, to encourage EVs, you need to add that incentives. And the countries and the member states will lose revenue because you're not taxing the EVs, or you're not, you're losing taxation from liquid fuels. But it is a challenge, but it is something that should be invested for the long-term growth of the region, I believe.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I was thinking about this specific item is that at the end, the external balance of currency can also make an impact. If the imported fuels is going down, then you wouldn't have to purchase so much, international money to pay for that fuel. So also, I think that could, as you say, it's a long-term vision, and also kind of see in a whole comprehensive way all the impacts that it may have.
Yes, most definitely, Joni. Thank you. Yes, the foreign exchange is an issue in the region. Yes, and most definitely we have to look at properly utilizing our valuable foreign exchange.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We have another questions. It says, considering the e-mobility relies on renewable energy sources to achieve its highest potential and benefits, what do you consider the biggest challenge is on this matter?
Yeah, so it may be unlikely, even in the long term, for all the islands in the Caribbean to be 100% powered from renewables. There are challenges with powering your grid 100% from renewables. There are studies which show that you do need some sort of fossil fuel involvement for the grid stability. I would say that when you compare EV to a ICE vehicle or internal combustion engine vehicle, and even if you charge that EV with fossil fuel, be it natural gas or diesel, you make more efficient use of that fossil fuel and you emit less, even though you're not charging with renewable energy, when you compare it to your traditional ICE vehicle, which you're using fossil fuels. It all has to relate to the well to wheel, or where you look at emissions from the power plant all the way to your wheels, and you do a corresponding analysis with the ICE vehicle. So yes, ideally we want to charge our EVs with renewable energy solely, but there are benefits from just adopting EVs in the current environment with fossil fuel and burning fossil fuels, in terms of using less ground transportation fuel and reducing emissions.
Thank you so much. We do have 2 more minutes to go, so I will hand you the last question that says, considering the Caribbean context and economic activities, what would you consider are the low-hanging fruits for e-mobility in the region? Should e-mobility project focus on navigable transportation? I guess is the indigenous transportation that you were talking about.
Yeah. So the low-hanging fruit, I would say, to help adopt EVs in the region, Joni, is a more integrated approach between the utility and the providers of EVs and the government. So I mentioned to you that Barbados has a problem right now with their charging of the EVs, in that they don't know who owns the EV and where they're charging. So that is something that would have been solved easily if there was a proper planning and conversations around e-mobility with the utility and the other stakeholders. So if you ask me what a low-hanging fruit is, I would say opening lines of communications with the utility and the stakeholders, and the utilities accepting that EVs are going to be part of the short-term, middle-term, and long-term future. And EVs, well-done feasibility studies that investigate all the pathways and fuel use for transportation. Because it is easy to impose a short-term tax on EVs at this time, when it's an economic challenging time for the region because of COVID and otherwise. But we need to do some studies, and technocrats in the region need to highlight that we need to put these incentives in place for the long-term development of EVs. And I think these are 2 areas that needs to be focused on: better communications between the stakeholders, especially the utility, and keeping the utility at the center. And also, governments need to be properly and well advised when it comes to e-mobility and what's best for the country in terms of saving the revenue and investing in the future.
Yes, I think that the communication is something very challenging also in Latin American countries. I think it's in all countries must be, I guess. It's this communication to know whether EVs will be charged, to know where EVs will be parked, and how to manage all that information data to actually get the best out of the electric mobility. I think it's a really challenging thing. We are looking at it at the big data management that is crucial, but is really, really complicated, and most related to information security, data exchange, and all those kind of things. So I think that we are in the same boat for heading for the same problem. So we are done with our presentation today for the hour. Thank you so much, Caris, for all your knowledge, for sharing all your knowledge for the presentation. I guess that I hope everyone that is listening will see that this information is very valuable for all the countries, not only for the Caribbean, but also for the Latin American countries. We have to look to what is happening in the Caribbean, because it's really interesting. They are getting ahead of so many things that many other countries don't know. So thank you so much, Caris, for putting out all this information. As you know, this presentation, this webinar, and all the webinars that we've done are uploaded to our website, that is movelatam.org. You can find everything there, and obviously this presentation with the documented that Caris just showed us. So thank you so much, Caris, for your presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone, for being there for us one more time.
Thank you.
Bye.